What's the most desperate thing you've ever done for money? Let's get right into the first story. About 10 years ago, when I was homeless, a kind old homeless lady that I used to buy water and snacks for was crying because she was $20 short of getting a hotel room for the night, and she wanted to shower so bad. So I had a friend drive me to Walmart, and I walked around the parking lot looking for receipts until I found one with something decent that wasn't food. It had a $40 case of diapers on it. So I went inside, matched the barcode on the receipt to a box of diapers on the shelf, and went up to customer service and said my mom wanted me to return them. Got $40 cash, gave half to the lady for her hotel, and spent that rest on food and drinks. She was so happy she started crying again and hugged me. I still think about that day a lot. Next story. I made $50 when I was randomly approached in a bar to be on a foot fetish site. There was no nudity or actual sexiness involved, just a lot of pictures of women's feet on my face, chest, etc. It was way more uncomfortable than it should have been. Third story. I participated in some market research for a new beer. Sounded great at the time. I get paid to drink beer? Anyway, it was a bunch of different beers in small plastic cups, all of which started out tasting like the strainings of the devil's underpants, and progressively got worse. They kept bringing more out until one guy cracked, swiped all his beers off the table, and stormed out yelling I wouldn't even give this crap to my dog. I still don't know if it was market research or some bizarre psychological experiment. Fourth story. I was poor growing up, really poor. One time, around age 8 or 9, I collected a bunch of buttons, wherever I could find them around the house, and then hit the street, door to door, trying to sell them for $1 a piece. It took me 3 hours to make $5. I was so excited that I finally had enough money to buy a sugary cereal, Lucky Charms. I went to the supermarket, bought a box and got home to eat it, but we didn't have milk, so I started to cry. I ended up using water instead. It was very pitiful. Fast forward 40 years and now I can buy milk and cereal anytime I want. It's great. I never take it for granted. Fifth story. I joined a medical study that was researching the effects of severe weight gain and weight loss on bone marrow. Involved 10 days of eating 6,000 calories a day, and then 10 days of not eating anything. You had to stay in a hospital room the entire time. Every day they took a bone marrow sample, which was decidedly not fun. $7,000 at the end of the 20 days. Sixth story. You know you have reached rock bottom when you start working in life insurance. On my last leg I got my insurance license, and then learned the job was purely commission, and you make more money if you are a manager, only to find out that as a manager you have operational costs. So you actually end up spending more money just to get through the month. Then you find out it's a pyramid scheme. This is not an insurance company, it is a hiring company that had a revolving door that never stopped spinning. Next story. Held a sign for people to see at an intersection. Normally this isn't bad. However, it is a local thing to bully those that do by throwing food items like milkshakes and slushies at them, which is why I was hesitant to do so. Eighth story. Participated in a sleep study where they had us wired up to electrodes to monitor our responses at periodic intervals across 3 days without sleep. It was brutal. I learned I cannot go without sleep for 2 days in a row. Story number 9. I pawned some handmade jewelry that was passed to me from someone very special. When I got paid less than 2 weeks later, my items were missing from the pawn shop. I have never gotten over that, and it makes me sad I never even got to wear her jewelry to something special. Story number 10. I met a complete stranger from the internet to sell him some used underwear. If it were a send it in the mail thing, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But part of it was that he wanted me to meet him to give them to him, and then he would pay me in cash. It was a pretty good amount, so I went for it. We talked for a while beforehand and he was really nice. I didn't get the vibe that I was gonna get killed, and I needed the money. It was a quick meet in a Walmart parking lot. Nothing really bad happened. Next story. I participated in a food study where I couldn't eat for a day before. Arrived at the lab crazy early in the morning, had a tube put down my throat, and lay there for 6 hours as they pumped liquids into and out of my stomach. After the first 2 hours I begged them to at least turn on the TV. But they would only let me watch PBS so I couldn't accidentally see any commercials about food. It wasn't fun, but the pay was decent, and they served me a steak dinner afterward. Story number 12. I scrounged every inch of my car, trunk, under carpet, pulled out seats, to find enough change not to bounce a check. I needed less than $1 and had about an hour to find the money and deposit it. The banker lady knew what was up when I made the deposit. 30-some years later and I still haven't bounced a check. Story number 13. Many years ago, when I was a child and my mother and I were facing homelessness, we'd spend the nights at various places, like laundromats or hospitals. One night when we were really hungry, she had me dive into the wishing well to collect quarters to use for the vending machine. It's one of those surreal memories that stuck with me. Let's get to the next story. I worked at a little Hampton Inn. My sister and I had a small apartment, So roof over our heads, but very little food. We would take naps so we didn't have to think about being hungry. I started lifting food from work. A few small danishes, some single-serve cups of peanut butter and jam, the commercial packs of coffee for her, and she would use just one for days. We'd buy bread and eggs mainly. I'm pretty sure the owner was on to me though. He left at 5, either went to dinner or home, then would end up back when I was on shift because he accidentally ordered an extra dinner. Or his wife made too much again of chicken and rice or spaghetti. I'd take it home and share. It was just a rough year. My mom visited and was shocked. Immediately took us to Costco to stock up. We were still eating off that food a year later. She bought us so much. Nothing fancy. But we felt like royalty with all that food. My definition of success is being able to go to the grocery store and buy whatever I want, without counting cost as I shop. Happy to say, I am a total success. Next story. In university, I signed up as a lab rat for various studies. One involved staying awake for 30+ hours in a room with no sunlight, communication, or anything else that might give me a sense of time. Among blood and urine tests, as well as various probes and monitoring devices, it also involved keeping a thermometer in my eye the entire time. $1,400 is $1,400 though. Next story. Medical study in college. Hoo boy. I was told I would receive a free dental checkup as part of the study, as well as $75, 25 years ago. First they gave me a questionnaire about going to the dentist, and if I had any fears related to it. I didn't. Going to the dentist sometimes involves discomfort, but it's always worth it. Next they hooked a bunch of probes to my face, which stayed on for the entire study. They then had me watch a slideshow of random images: a field of flowers, a toaster, a Rottweiler with teeth bared, a smiling woman, a dentist drill, a book, a gun pointed at the camera, an airplane, a dentist chair, etc. Then the dentist came in for a quick checkup. No cavities. He then tells me I'm now going to use a Florida probe, which will measure the distance between your tooth and gum. He then sticks the probe between the tooth and gum of my back molar, and I nearly jump out of the chair in pain. That crap hit the nerve and it hurt. He then applied the Florida probe to every one of my teeth, to the point I was doing a quick, panicky inhale every time he went in. When he was finished, all of my teeth felt like they were vibrating. They then had me watch the slideshow again. Remember the questionnaire, the probes, and the images? Oh, I get it. They're trying to detect a new fear response when the dentist-related images appear, you a-holes. I seriously considered spending my $75 on a baseball bat, and going back to tell them what I thought of their study. Next story. I slept with my 64-year-old landlady. In my defense, it was either that or sleep on the streets. Let's get to the next story. Just to be clear, I don't have a very hard life and I've never been as desperate as some people in this thread. I was offered a signed copy of Albert Camus' L'Étranger in my early 20s. It's my favorite book and my then girlfriend spent a hefty amount of money to buy this for me. Years later I went through rough times and really needed money to pay my rent. And having no other practical solution, I ended up selling my beloved signed book to an acquaintance of mine. Funny thing is, 17 years later he still had the book, and accepted to sell it back to me for the same amount he bought it from me. Cheapest loan ever, I guess. Next story. I was newly broke as a joke and had a date in hours. She wanted to go to Red Lobster. I went through my car, parents' cars, sisters' cars, couches, everything looking for coins. I had a partial used gift card to somewhere as well. I took it all to the grocery store, cashed in the change, sold the gift card for practically nothing. I had just enough to cover myself. If she expected me to get the bill, I was finished. I'd have to own up to having like $31.25 to my name. Luckily, she didn't. She piped up and split the bill. So now we're married. Story number 20. Selling condoms in a male restroom at a bar. Needed cash for a train ticket back home to the neighboring town. Was just standing in a corner offering rubber for some coins. Next story. A few years after high school, one of my HS crushes messaged me on Facebook. I was in between jobs and still living at home. She said she was coming back into town and wanted to hang out. I didn't have any money for a date. I took some rifles that were handed down to me by family to pawn shop to sell. They offered me a ridiculously low amount. I felt embarrassed and put on the spot. I wanted the date to happen. Sold the rifles. Next day we got to talking and she apologized and told me we would not be hanging out and that she was going on a date with one of her crushes from high school. Story number 22. Spent 3 weeks on my knees planting tulip bulbs in a field in Holland in October. Bulbs were covered in formaldehyde, and a layer of skin fell off my hands. Slept in a semi-derelict caravan, and lived off raw carrots. Fortunately, there was also some good hash, and you could buy beer for £2 a crateful to take the edge off. Next story. I used to pose naked for art classes while I was an undergrad. Pay was pretty good, about 5 times minimum wage. One grad student who was a good artist but kind of odd asked if I would do a private session of a few hours. I agreed as I was desperate for money. I figured that I had just been hired for S. I was a bit conflicted but then just figured why not. I showed up cleaned and prepped, and dressed to look good, and it turned out that the artist really did want me to pose. During the whole thing they were polite but very specific on poses, and it was actually a bit challenging. They were so intense. While not particularly good looking, the talent and effort was kind of a turn on. By the end I was half hoping it would turn into S and they would keep telling me how to pose, what to do, etc. We went over the time, but the artist was nice and grateful and paid extra. So I guess that I learned I would be willing to have S for money in some situations. Next story. I acted in some OnlyFans videos. It was with a girl I had a FWB thing with. I was not comfortable doing it but I was drowning in department, and my EI had run out, so I agreed. She paid me. We made a video once a week for about 4 to 5 months. Helped me get out of department and pay the bills until I found a job. The biggest thing I sacrificed was my self-esteem. A few weeks in she admitted that she asked me because I'm kinda ugly and a little fat, but that just makes me relatable to her fans. It really made me feel disgusting and absolutely destroyed any sort of self-worth I had. Story number 25. Coming up with titles for many hundreds of videos. It was on one of those online digital work sites. The task was to look through some random still images of a vid and come up with a descriptive title, like big boob bimbos bouncing bodaciously or blonde SS and FS like crazy or something like that. If you've been on any site you know what I'm talking about. It was all piece work, paying like 7 to 9 cents a pop, dropped in batches of 30,000 or so on the site, and it was first come first serve for which worker got to do them. It sounds like fun at first, but it got mentally grueling after a while doing them all at once and hard to keep coming up with titles. I could never quite do enough fast enough to earn even minimum wage, but I was holed up in bed at the time with various medical issues, and had nothing else going for me at the time, so I was still happy to do it. Next story. I wanted to pay for my kid's high school graduation ring. He worked so hard and was going to graduate against all odds. To pay for the ring and get it made and delivered in time for me to give it to him on graduation day, I sold my complete Sub Pop Singles Club collection. That included Nirvana's first 45 Love Buzz and extremely rare pressings from the White Stripes, Smashing Pumpkins, Iron and Wine, Death Cab for Cutie, and Sunny Day Real Estate. The ring arrived the day before graduation day. Next story. Started to play online poker from zero, never played before, while being homeless. Once I met a guy who was sitting and playing poker. I talked with him for an hour while he was playing, and that gave me idea that this is my chance. My goal was to make $10 every night playing in a computer club. It worked, and became sustainable for me. After I fixed my life a bit, got a roof and my own PC, I tried to make poker my lifelong thing but I couldn't. When my life wasn't depend on the poker income, the game started to bore me. I couldn't have any focus playing and lost interest completely. I don't think I ever played poker after. Story number 28. Back when I was a competitive horseback rider in my late teens, I mucked stalls for 12 hours on Saturday and Sunday for one extra riding lesson a week. 24 hours work for one 1-hour lesson on my pony I was paying to lease. That was actually a sweet deal. One lesson was $30.80. Minimum wage was about $8. Worst was when I was training a hole's ponies and broke my jaw on a Saturday and got yelled at for not working Sunday. I went to the ER on Monday and got yelled at for waiting so long and rushed into surgery. I didn't eat solid food for 6 weeks. They used to wire shut. I can talk, cough, yawn, without opening my mouth still. Let's get to the next story. Waited at a Carl's Jr. for a repo job. Tow guy never showed up. Owner came by a half hour later, gave me $100 and told me to show up same time tomorrow. I did it for 3 days night shift and knocked out of there. Good money but not worth it, and that was with me riding along with someone. Story number 30. As a kid with a single parent, I was aware of the financial struggles from the start. I wanted to help my mom somehow. When I was 6 or 7, just before Christmas, I handmade Christmas cards. I loved drawing and coloring, and I'm not saying it was any good, but I was enthusiastic and creative, and went door to door selling them to people on our street. I remember selling some and my mom accusing me of stealing money because she didn't believe anyone would buy them. 3 years later, my mom occasionally helped out at the flower nursery and would bring me with her. I noticed they would discard some flowers because they weren't in a perfect shape. I asked if I can take some with me. They let me have them, and I plucked bad petals leaves and used wire to keep some of the wilted ones upright. I made 2 bunches from the cast-offs, sat next to the local bus stop around the time people were coming back from work, sold them within 20 minutes, and immediately went to buy my nerdy self a kid's puzzle magazine. That was the only thing I would ask my mom for every month. Let's get to the next story. waited in an alley to rob the first person to walk by, came to my senses and went home left before that could happen. I would lost my job through no fault of my own. My partner left me as a direct result. I was homeless, and I hadn't eaten in 2 days. Again, I just couldn't take it anymore. Let's get to the next story. Oh boy. Well, it took 9 years and a court mandate for my ex-husband to help in any way, financially, with our daughter. It was a really difficult time period for us. I literally counted out pennies to have enough to get groceries or a quarter tank of gas. I always thought she'd like to have my wedding rings to her dad someday. I have my mom's ring from my dad even though they split when I was a baby. It means a lot but isn't worth anything. It's silver. My rings weren't worth much either, but I finally had to hawk them. I got $150 for them and I couldn't get enough money to buy them back. I'll never forgive myself for that. Next story. Retail security. I had to put up with actual violence. Threats of violence, being shouted at, having hypodermic needles waved in my face, having excrement thrown at me, 15-minute breaks, 2 of them per 14-hour shift, and being the blame for anything going wrong in the store. The shop staff were the worst. In their eyes, I was the lowest of the low and should know my place. 1 or 2 were okay, but the rest got a kick out of dropping me in it. Say hello to someone when you come into work, got reported. Didn't say hello the next day to the same person, I got reported for it. The staff thought that they could talk down to me, treat me like crap, and I had to stand there and take it. Dear help me, if I said anything in return they could threaten me with violence. But if I snapped back, I got reported to my company and the store employee was given counseling. And all I did was tell someone to F off after they said that they would, given half a chance, stab me. That was completely out of the blue. The employee was in an aisle that I was patrolling down, and came out with it. They were deadly serious. But telling someone threatening to stab you to F off is apparently the worst crime out there. According to that particular store. You couldn't pay me to go back. Story number 34. Got a sugar mama and went to stay a week with her in Philadelphia. I knew she was overweight from our talks and picture exchanges, which didn't bother me. What I did not expect was that she was morbidly obese, like 670-something pounds morbidly obese. Also, that she was very grimy and gross. So gross that the folks Frank Reynolds associated with looked like saints compared to her. Then she tried to convince me to live in her basement, and crap. I thought I was never going to make it home. Story number 35. Went to college in Michigan where recyclable cans are 10 cents a piece when returned. I would go around to all the dorm recycling bins and grab the cans and return them. It felt really greasy. Hey, thanks for subscribing and liking, it really means a lot to me. While you are here, feel free to hop on over to the last video. See you there. Ronnie.